Russia just summoned Japan's ambassador to Moscow. Not over a territorial dispute, not over sanctions, not over anything that looks like a conventional diplomatic incident. Over a drone. A $2,500 drone built in a basement in Kharkiv by a Ukrainian startup that didn't exist 3 years ago, backed by a Japanese company that, until last month, mostly surveyed oil pipelines. And Moscow is furious, which tells you everything you need to know about how badly this is going for them. Because here's the thing about Japan, you don't usually see them coming. This is a country that spent 80 years telling the world it had no interest in military power. No aggression, no projection, just a pacifist constitution, a polite foreign policy, and the occasional stern letter. The kind of country that shows up to a geopolitical crisis with a disaster relief fund and a very organized supply chain, and somehow, quietly, without anyone really noticing the exact moment it happened, Japan became one of the most strategically dangerous countries on the planet. Not because it got louder, because it got serious. And in 2026, serious Japan is causing problems in at least 3 different directions simultaneously. Russia is furious about the drones. China is staring nervously at a missile it didn't expect Japan to have. And North Korea is watching a defense budget that's grown so fast it would give any economist whiplash. This is the story of how a country that wasn't supposed to matter militarily became the one country its adversaries can't afford to ignore. Let's start with the drone that started a diplomatic incident. On March 31st, 2026, in a press conference held in Kyiv, not Tokyo, Kyiv, 2 CEOs stood in front of cameras and announced something that should have been impossible 5 years ago. Toru Tokushige, founder of Terra Drone Corporation, a publicly listed Japanese tech company with over 3,000 completed industrial projects worldwide, and Maxim Klimenko, founder of Amazing Drones, a Ukrainian company that started in 2023 as a volunteer operation run by engineers and soldiers who needed something Russia didn't have an answer for. Together, they unveiled the Terra A1, an interceptor drone. $2,500 to build, 300 kilometers per hour top speed, 32-kilometer range, electric propulsion, almost no heat signature, almost no noise, and designed for one specific job: hunting down Russian Shahed drones and destroying them before they reach their target. Now let's talk about why that price matters, because this is where the math becomes genuinely uncomfortable for Moscow. Russia's Shahed-type drone costs roughly $35,000 to build. Ukraine used to counter them with Patriot interceptor missiles. Each Patriot missile costs approximately $4 million. Read that again. A $35,000 drone being intercepted by a $4 million missile. Ukrainian drone specialists deployed to the Middle East watched American forces fire up to 8 Patriot missiles at a single aerial target. 8. That's $32 million to destroy one drone. The Terra A1 does the same job for $2,500. This isn't just a weapon, it's a budget correction, and it arrives at precisely the moment Ukraine needed it most. In March 2026 alone, Russia fired 6,462 Shahed-type drones at Ukraine. Using the old model, Patriot missiles for everything, that would have cost Ukraine over $25 billion to intercept at 100%. Using Terra A1 economics, you're looking at roughly $16 million. That's not a rounding error. That's a complete rewriting of the cost structure of modern air defense. But here's where it gets more interesting, because this drone isn't just cheap. It's fast. 100 kilometers per hour faster than a typical Shahed, which means it doesn't wait for the drone to arrive, it hunts it. Electric motor means almost no acoustic signature. Low heat means almost no thermal signature, stealth built into the physics of the thing. In most intercept scenarios, the Shahed operator back in Russia won't know the Terra A1 is coming until it's already there. And then there's the autonomy. The goal, already being worked on, is fully automatic operation. Automatic launch, independent targeting, interception without an operator in the loop, which means eventually Russia sends a drone. And a Japanese Ukrainian machine handles it, no human required. Terra Drone's CEO Tokushige didn't get here by accident. He visited wartime Ukraine personally, multiple times, walked through the frontline city of Kharkiv where Amazing Drones operates, sat with Ukrainian engineers who have been doing this under active bombardment for 3 years. He came back to Tokyo with something no amount of laboratory testing can produce, real-world data from a real war. That's worth more than almost anything else in modern weapons development, and Japan just bought it. Now here's the diplomatic punchline. On April 8, 2026, Russia's foreign ministry summoned Japan's ambassador, officially called the Terra drone investment overly hostile and detrimental to Russia's security interests. Blamed Japan for unprecedentedly low bilateral relations. Japan, for its part, said essentially nothing dramatic, which is very on brand. But if you needed a signal that this partnership hit exactly where it was supposed to, Moscow telling Tokyo's ambassador to come in for a chat is probably it. There's a version of this story where Japan and Ukraine have nothing to do with each other. For most of the last century, that was basically true. Japan was focused inward, or on the Pacific. Ukraine was a Soviet republic, then a post-Soviet state, then a country most Japanese people could find on a map but couldn't quite explain the significance of. And then Putin invaded, and something strange started happening. Because Ukraine, under the pressure of an existential war, became the most advanced real-world testing ground for drone warfare on Earth. Not theoretical, not in a laboratory, in live combat under electronic jamming against an adversary that adapts quickly and has no shortage of ammunition. Every drone Ukraine built had to survive that environment, or it didn't get built again. That kind of pressure produces knowledge you cannot buy. You can only earn it. And Ukraine earned it the hard way. Japan noticed. By February 2026, President Zelensky had already announced Ukraine was ready to share its marine drone and interceptor technologies with Japan directly, not sell, share. The two countries signed a 10-year security agreement in 2024, covering humanitarian aid, reconstruction, and defense technology cooperation. Japan pledged $20 billion in total support to Ukraine. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization concluded grant agreements with 47 Japanese companies to test their technologies inside Ukraine. And in March 2026, the two governments began preparing an intergovernmental framework specifically designed to facilitate defense equipment transfers and joint weapons production. Japan is also reportedly looking at purchasing Ukrainian attack drones for its own arsenal. Think about that for a second. Japan, a country with one of the most sophisticated domestic defense industries on the planet, looking at Ukraine's combat-proven drone technology not as charity but as procurement, because Ukraine figured out something that took everyone else by surprise. When you have to fight a war in real time, with limited resources, against a well-armed adversary, you innovate faster than any defense contractor with a 5-year development cycle ever could. Interceptor drones that cost $2,500. FPV drones built in decentralized workshops to avoid being targeted. Unmanned surface vessels that no naval doctrine fully prepared for. Ukraine built a new kind of warfare, and Japan wants to learn it. Terra Drone's CEO Tokushige made the knowledge transfer explicit. He said Ukrainian engineers already know how to decentralize production and operate under constant threat, and that Terra Drone is studying and incorporating that approach. Which means Japan isn't just buying a drone. It's buying a manufacturing philosophy born in a war zone, and it's about to export that philosophy to the Gulf. Because Terra Drone has already announced plans to sell the Terra A1 to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, countries being hit by the same Iranian Shahed drones that Russia copied. Countries that have been watching Ukraine figure out how to defeat them cheaply. Countries that have existing relationships with Terra Drone through industrial drone contracts. The same drone, the same technology, the same $2,500 price tag, but now heading toward a completely different theater. What started as a Ukrainian survival tool is becoming a global product, with a Japanese corporate structure behind it and a Russian ambassador summons as free advertising. Now here's where the story changes register entirely, because the Terra A1 is new, exciting, and making headlines. But it's not the thing that's actually keeping Chinese and North Korean military planners awake at night. That's a different conversation. One that started in 2022 and has been accelerating ever since. For 8 decades, Japan operated under a very specific military philosophy, officially described as exclusively defense-oriented defense, meaning, if you attack us, we will defend ourselves, but we will not reach out and hit you back. We will not strike your bases. We will absorb and respond, not project. That doctrine made sense in 1947. It made sense in 1980. It made sense right up until the neighborhood started changing very fast. China's military budget has grown by roughly 600% since 2000. North Korea now has intercontinental ballistic missiles and nuclear warheads. Russia violated Japanese airspace in 2024. And all three of those countries have been deepening cooperation with each other. At some point, we'll only defend ourselves after being hit stops being a strategy. It starts being an invitation. Japan's national security strategy in 2022 said it directly. Missile attacks had become a palpable threat. Counterstrike capability was a minimum necessary measure for self-defense, and then Japan went shopping, not cautiously, not symbolically, at scale. 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles purchased from the United States. Range 1,600 kilometers. Enough reach to place Chinese and North Korean military installations within striking distance from Japanese soil. In September 2025, Japan deployed the destroyer JS Chokai to San Diego for Tomahawk integration and crew training, scheduled to be fully operational by September 2026. Alongside that, Japan accelerated its own Type 12 surface-to-ship missile program, deployed a full year ahead of schedule in March 2026. Original range 200 kilometers, upgraded range over 900 kilometers, eventually 1,500 kilometers. That's not a coastal defense missile anymore. That's a message. The country that supposedly gave up on military ambition in 1945 just deployed its own long-range strike missile ahead of schedule. Nobody sent a memo to Beijing. JASSM long-range air-launched missiles coming in 2027. Hypervelocity gliding projectiles under development. Hypersonic missiles on the roadmap. Japan's defense budget for 2025, $55 billion. For 2026, $56 billion. Target, 2% of GDP, roughly double what it spent a decade ago. The 5-year defense build-up plan launched in 2022 represents the largest military expansion Japan has undertaken since the Second World War. Not since the 1940s has Japan moved this fast. And what makes this different from a normal defense spending increase is the doctrine behind it. Japan isn't just buying more of what it already had, it's building a completely different kind of force. Mobile, networked, capable of operating across domains simultaneously. Air, sea, space, cyber. In March 2026, Japan and the United States launched the Japan Joint Operations Command, a permanent joint command structure for US-Japan forces focused on real-time situational awareness and rapid decision-making. That's not an exercise framework. That's a wartime command architecture being built in peacetime. Because Japan has decided that waiting for a crisis to organize is not a plan. And the geography driving all of this is very specific. Japan's southwest island chain, stretching from Kyushu down toward Taiwan, is now being hardened into a denial zone. Missile batteries on islands, ground-launched Type 12s covering sea lanes, air defense systems integrated with US forces. The message to Beijing, which has been increasingly aggressive around the East China Sea and increasingly explicit about Taiwan, is written in missile ranges and deployment timelines rather than diplomatic statements. A RAND Corporation expert summarized Japan's strategic driver in 4 words. China, the threat keeps getting worse. Japan isn't being subtle about it. Here's the uncomfortable summary for anyone sitting in Moscow, Beijing, or Pyongyang. Japan now has counterstrike capability for the first time since 1945. Tomahawk missiles going operational on destroyers within months. Long-range strike deployed ahead of schedule. A $56 billion defense budget and a joint command structure with the United States built for rapid wartime response. And it just made Russia angry enough to summon an ambassador over a $2,500 drone. For a country that spent 80 years not being a military problem for anyone, that is a remarkable list. Now add one final element that ties all of this together. Because Japan isn't just building capability, it's building coalition. The Global Combat Air Program, a next-generation stealth fighter being jointly developed with the UK and Italy, is scheduled for deployment in 2035. Reciprocal access agreements with both Australia and the UK allow Japanese forces to operate from their territory and vice versa. Regular joint exercises in the Indo-Pacific with the US, UK, and Australia. Japan used to be a spokes and hub ally, everything running through Washington. Now it's becoming a node in a network, with its own reach, its own production, its own combat-tested technology relationships. And here's the part Putin probably didn't account for when he invaded Ukraine in 2022. That war didn't just harden Europe. It handed Japan a connection to the most battle-hardened drone engineers on the planet. It demonstrated exactly what modern warfare looks like, and it gave Tokyo a very clear answer to the question of which direction history was moving. Putin's special military operation was supposed to take 3 days. It produced a Japan-Ukraine defense technology partnership, a $2,500 drone that Moscow officially protests, and a generation of Japanese defense planners who now have real-world data instead of Cold War theory. Russia's arms exports have fallen 64% in 5 years. Its former customers are looking elsewhere. Its influence in Venezuela has collapsed. Its Iranian relationship is in chaos. Meanwhile, Japan signed a $20 billion support package for Ukraine, sent 47 companies to test technologies inside Ukraine, deployed a destroyer to San Diego for Tomahawk integration, launched its own long-range missiles a year ahead of schedule, and built a drone with a Ukrainian startup that made Moscow angry enough to call in the ambassador. For a country that doesn't do military power, Japan is doing a remarkable amount of military power, without drama, without ceremony, without a single Hollywood speech, just a procurement notice, a Kyiv press conference, and a missile range that reaches further than anyone thought it would. Which brings us to the only real question left. How far is Japan willing to go, now that it's decided to go somewhere at all? Because 80 years of restraint doesn't disappear, but it doesn't stay unchanged either. Not when the neighborhood looks like this, not when the technology is moving this fast, and not when a $2,500 drone just proved that the most effective disruptions don't always announce themselves until Russia calls the ambassador, and then everyone notices.